Welcome back to Detroit Next. I'm Malachi Barrett from BridgeDetroit. We're here in the Detroit is Different studios with a great roundtable of informed folks here in the city to talk about where we kind of stand, what the candidates have said about some of the top issues here in the city, as we're a little over 2 weeks before the August 5th primary election. We're very focused on the mayoral race here at Detroit Next. Absentee ballots now have been out for a few weeks, and early in-person voting starts July 26th. So there have been, I believe, close to 25,000 absentee ballots returned as of this point. 99,000 have been issued. Big question is what turnout will look like in this race. I run into a lot of folks who are still undecided, who have that AB ballot sitting on their counter, trying to decide who is the best person to lead the city into the future. Of course, throughout this process with Detroit Next, we've had my partner here, Stephen Henderson, reporting and digging into the details. Stephen, who have we assembled today to dive into the details?
We've got a couple of really great voices from around the city and a really diverse kind of set of ideas, I think, that'll help us really think through what we've heard. I mean, if you think about it, we've been at this now almost 6 months, it feels like, since the beginning of the year. And there's been a lot of information. We've tried to put a lot of information out there about who the candidates are and what they're saying and kind of where the race is. There's a lot has changed over that time. I think we all know these candidates a little better than we did when they first said they wanted to run for mayor. And so what we've done is put together a panel of folks from across a number of different communities and interests in the city, just to talk about where we are and what we're thinking about the state of the race and, of course, the state of the city. Up first, we've got Anika Goss, who is the CEO of Detroit Future City. Anika, it's great to have you here. Maurice Weeks is the director of the Detroit City Appointments Project. That's something that Malachi actually wrote a story about recently. We'll hear more about what they're doing and how they're viewing the race. Yelena Ramautar is the Director of Member Services and Community Engagement for CDAD, that's the Community Development Advocates of Detroit. And Kamau Clark is Southeast Michigan lead organizer for We the People Michigan. It's great to have all of you here. And I said your name wrong there, Kamau. It's Kamau Jawara. Great to have you here with us. Malachi, where do you want to start here? There's a lot to think about. There's a lot going on. And again, we've only got like 2 weeks before people got to make a decision.
Yeah, I think we want to see how the top issues of the city land with our folks here and how it kind of lines up with what the candidates have been focusing on. I mean, I think there's so many places that this conversation will go, I think. But we're looking at an inflection point in the city. It's the first time in 12 years that we have a choice on the ballot other than Mike Duggan. The candidates are going to inherit a city that has made some strides to address some of its biggest issues, but has a long way to go, and will certainly have will not have access to some of the advantages that Mayor Duggan had. I think there's a lot of anxiety about the city potentially backsliding. I think there's a lot of questions about where are we even at in this growth that we've experienced in the city. Maybe it would be good just to hear from everyone a little bit about have we focused in this race in the 6+ months that we've been hearing from candidates? Has the conversation lined up with what you hear from residents about what's important? Come on, maybe that'd be a good place for you to start.
Yeah, I appreciate this question. So my best answer is yes and no. I think that I have the pleasure of probably being the youngest person here. I'm 27, so I'm Gen Z. Something that I hear on doors, often what I hear is I hear about home repairs, I hear about public safety. And those have been conversations about home ownership, public safety, neighborhood investment. Those have really been like the core conversations that folks have been having in mayoral forums. I think that there are other things that are concerning to particularly younger populations in Detroit around whether it be transportation, economic like opportunity and jobs. And so I would say that yes, they've engaged with some of the issues of folks who are consistent voters and participate in the like electoral process consistently. For younger people or folks who really kind of need a little bit more of a reason to engage, I don't think that they've had a lot of those conversations.
Yeah. So Kamau, voter turnout is a huge issue here in the city, and I think that's especially true with younger people, and we know that's true nationally with younger people that we have a hard time getting them to that point where they are feeling like, okay, I want to be part of this process. I think I have a voice. Do you feel like in this race, because there are so many choices, because there have been so many opportunities for people to see and hear from the candidates, that younger people are maybe a little more energized, or do you worry still about how much they want to actually be part of the process?
Yeah, I would say that I worry still, largely because one, like I talk to young people, I organize young people. I was doing some polling this week actually, just through social media, through Instagram. And I think what's interesting is for a lot of younger folks, they don't actually see the like importance of city government. One, just because I think we're taught to kind of see executive seats as very powerful, as like final decision makers. So if anything, I think people look at the mayoral seat, but they don't look at the full picture of how they would be interfacing with communities, city council. So I do still have some concerns. I don't think that there has been enough youth engagement around this election, or even just having conversations with young people about the things that they're like wanting to see to like keep them in Detroit and retain young people. So I'd say at the moment I'm concerned, but I also know that that's like very close to my work and something that I engage with.
Let's I want to follow up on that in a little bit, but I want to hear from Yelena a little bit about what she's been hearing from folks as part of her advocacy work at CDAD. I know you guys are very involved in conversations with the neighborhoods. Have you heard candidates, address a lot of the issues that have come up in your conversations with voters? What's not being talked about right now, or maybe give us some insight there.
So at CDAD, we've hosted a mayoral forum, and we had 6 of the 9 candidates come out to the forum. And from membership, we hear a lot about affordable housing. They're very concerned about that. We have a lot of nonprofit developers, so their access to land, the relationship with the land bank. But I think that not a lot of candidates are talking about the larger political climate, which worries me because Detroit is not a bubble. It does not function outside the state, and it doesn't function outside the federal government. So, what we hear from some of our folks as well, because again, our membership covers all 7 council districts, it kind of leaves out an immigrant voice as well, because immigrants are here in this city. And it's not just Southwest. So, as an immigrant woman working in community development, I'm a little concerned because there is a lot of conversations about certain topics. And so when I'm in some of these spaces and some of our members, they push back and ask some really hard questions around how would you handle certain areas that we're not hearing a lot about. One of the things we've raised is about environmental justice as well. And again, not a lot of conversations are happening. Yes, it's a talking point, but not real detail. So there's a lot more happening in the city, and I feel like some of the candidates are not really well aware of it. The feedback we get, or at least the engagement we've seen, sounds very much like talking points and not real engagement with that particular issue. Like we talk about younger voters. I also think about the 30 and 40-year olds where I fall into, but they're not really talking to me. Yes, public safety is an issue, but I want to know, how are you going to help working families? We are in crisis where families are going to lose medical benefits. They're going to lose food benefits. we have some issues there. What are we going to do? So again, I come back to that question of how do we as a city, a black and brown city, function in an America that's moving in a direction that's not going to be for us? And we cannot just say, oh, we're going to just talk about this, but how do we function in that larger bubble? And I'd love to hear some of the candidates really talk about that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There has been some discussion of immigrants and what we can do to support them, mostly in the context of whether DPD should be involved in ICE raids, and we can definitely talk about that. But I have not really heard as much about what do we do in the climate of Medicaid cuts. There's been acknowledgement of, we're not going to have as much federal funding from the Trump administration for, HUD, for housing programs, for public transportation. I have not seen as much about, what is in this big, beautiful bill. How is that landing down? But these are all forces that the candidates are going to have to deal with. I want to hear from Maurice for a second, because with the City Appointments Project, this is a group that was put together specifically to make sure that there were going to be professional, qualified civil servants that can help the next mayor, whoever they are. You guys aren't endorsing anybody in particular. Help whoever the next mayor is implement their vision, and make sure that there are professionals who can take on those really important roles of like leading city departments and making sure things are done on time and the way they should be. Um, Maurice, can you walk us through a little bit about why that's important here, and your perspective on how the candidates have talked about their approach to like the organization of the city itself? Like this is a organization with like a $3 billion budget and 8,000 some civil employees, as I heard Santil Jenkins say today at a mayoral forum I attended.
Yeah. First, just underlining the last two comments that were said. I think that they're spot on, and it's part of why I think that some of the appointments are so important. I think from our perspective, I mean, we've heard a lot of really huge promises from the candidates, and that is not at all to say that some of those things can't be true. But we know that without really, really qualified people who have experience and can answer really detailed questions about how to enact those policies. So if you're going to build a ton of affordable housing units, how are you going to do that? If you're going to make sure that we can withstand the disappearance of ARPA funds, how are you going to do that? That's not necessarily the mayor themselves making those decisions. Those are the people who are appointed around them. So yeah, we think that's really critically important. And so far, we've heard folks talk about who they're going to appoint around them, just in little snippets. Folks that they're going to keep on who are currently in city government, or the most common point was saying that they just are not going to talk about it at all because it's a premature thing to discuss, which I really disagree with. I think that everyone can see the economic crisis and cliff that is coming for the city, and residents in particular, my neighbors, can feel it. They feel this moment of uncertainty, and I think we feel it especially hard in Detroit as a Black and brown city, and as a city with the past that we have. So if you're not talking detailed plans about how you're actually going to do these things, then I think you're leaving a lot on the table. And I think some of what you're leaving on the table is the trust of voters. They want people who are going to really be able to execute. And part of that is through your personnel.
I want to definitely dive into some of these things, and I feel like Anika would be a good table setter for us here. And I should mention, Yelena said that there are 9 candidates in this race. Just quickly, so that everybody knows, that it includes businessman Jonathan Barlow, businessman Joel Hashim, Solomon Kinlock, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, Fred Durhall III, a city council member and former state legislator, Santil Jenkins, who was previously the CEO of the Heat and Warmth Fund and was also on the city council and served as council president. Current city council president Mary Sheffield, former police chief James Craig, attorney Todd Perkins, and Danetta Simpson, who is a previous mayoral candidate. And I'm sorry, I can't remember her professional. You're gonna have to just cut that out. Anika, Detroit Future City has identified some of the biggest problems facing the city and put together a brief recommending some things that the next mayor should focus on. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into that work and maybe how it's been received? I'm not sure if you had the chance to actually put that to any mayoral candidates thus far and talk with them about it.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me join the conversation today. And I agree with everybody's comments on here already. I feel like you don't even need our brief. You're pretty clear on what needs to be done. But the brief, the way we wanted to really focus the brief and the information in the brief was really about how do you focus on building a middle class for Detroit and retaining the middle class households that are here and the middle class households to come in the future. And the brief really focused on economic opportunity, climate, business and business opportunity, affordable housing. So a lot of the topics that we talked about there, being a welcoming city. And so I think one of the things that's missing, from at least from what we've heard and what the narrative that we really want to begin to see is how do we position Detroit as a city of opportunity, and what actually is entailed in order to do that. Why would I want to stay here if I get that great job and my income increases, even though I'm a lifelong Detroiter? It's much easier and cost and much more cost benefit to me for me to move to a suburb as opposed to staying in Detroit. And so the opportunity that we have to provide would be that Detroit is a place for you to grow your income, wealth, and thrive, no matter where you are in the income spectrum, no matter what your family looks like, right here in Detroit. And being very specific about that has to be a part of that approach, and doing the hard work for that under very difficult conditions that the previous administration had a different set of difficult conditions. But the next mayor will have even more difficult conditions. So the brief, as we outlined it, building a middle class for the next administration, it has been received really well. And we've actually heard from several of the candidates directly that are, trying to build out a strategy based on this, that really want to focus on what this would look like in terms of every neighborhood has an opportunity to become a middle class neighborhood. Every household has the opportunity to build their own income and wealth from wherever they are. So I do think it was very well received, and we're really pleased about that.
To be honest, I feel like I've heard a lot of candidates identify the same. They seem to be largely in agreement about what problems the city faces, in terms of like affordability and public safety and education. And a lot of the solutions that they've offered sound fairly similar with some kind of occasional differences there. And it feels to me that a lot of the focus of this race has been more on who is most experienced to implement a vision that a lot of candidates kind of agree on. And obviously, all elections come down to who do you trust most to lead the city and to represent you. I'd like to just open this up for everybody. I mean, how much do you think experience really matters here? What kinds of experience is important? Do voters really care if somebody has had elected office or not? I think we're in an interesting time now where this idea of like a political outsider coming in, we've seen that work, and then we've seen when that has not worked so well. And I'll keep my own comments out of that. But what do you guys think about the importance of experience in this race?
I'm a little nervous about that, because I'll say this. If I'm going to the doctor's office, I need my doctor to have some experience. I need them to have some credentials. I think this idea that you have to have no experience to lead a city is a dangerous place that we're playing in. I strongly believe with anything that we do, we ask for experience. Almost any job we apply for, we need to have experience. And so, because right now, as you mentioned, Malachi, Detroit is on a weird axis right now. We have just come out of certain things, but we can slide easily. So if you don't have some experience managing the budget, knowing what that is, what the pitfalls are going to be, we really are not at the space to be able to do a lot of 2 years of learning on the job. Now, there will be a learning curve, but you have to have some experience there. And again, I come back to a very, very crazy political time. I mean, there's lots of ways I could put it, but where we've gotten to the space where folks feel like we need an outsider, we need somebody who's going to shake things up, but we've shaked things up nationally to the point where we are in crisis and we are sliding into, we already here, into fascism. So how do we as a city going to have to fight back a lot um, if we don't have leadership that understands the full picture, that has some experience? So I stand with the fact that I believe we need a mayor with some experience in government that understands what's happening. If not, we are really playing a very dangerous game where it could hurt us in very, very bad ways. And so, I mean, that's just where I am with our next mayor.
I I totally second that, Yelena, and I think one of the things that is happening not just here in Detroit but around the country is people are attacking folks who have this level of experience, not because of the experience themselves, but because they want something that is different than business as usual. So you can have experience and want to change the course of things that are going on, and I think there are lots of things that are happening in the city that voters actively dislike and would love to change, and that's great. And that doesn't mean that you have to have absolutely no government experience in order to enact those things. Yeah, it's critically important that someone knows what a mayor actually does. It's critically important that someone knows how the city interacts with the department, with DPS CD, with city council, how to hire out for an enormous administration. Like, these are really, really important things that we really do not have the time to have someone come in and learn on the job. And the other thing I would say is, like, when you come in and don't have that experience, it creates a vacuum, and we don't know how that vacuum is going to get filled. It could be filled by folks who are, just looking to exploit the city. It could be filled by folks who are already in the city and are there. So yeah, we want experience. I think experience is a really important thing for a mayor to come into office having.
So here's an interesting question for everyone. Experience is one thing. Leadership, I think, is something different. So I'm curious for everyone else here. How do you look? How are you looking at that? Right? Are you looking for someone who has had certain kinds of jobs, or are you looking for somebody who seems like they can step forward and lead the city, lead the council, lead neighborhoods, lead communities to something better?
I can. Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, because I while I also agree that we can't have someone who is was formerly the manager at Kroger and just couch mayoral, coaching from the couch in terms of, if I were the mayor, I would do. But what we've also seen in the past is a lot of politicking as opposed to really managing a city. And while there is a lot of politics, obviously, that goes into being, leading the executive office, we're also in a position where the next mayor is going to have to really be heads down to deal with a lot of these issues, right? Like they're going to come in with a financial burden that this Duggan administration did not have. They will not have the benefit of the bankruptcy credit or any of the large scale federal investments or any of these other significant investments. They're going to have to figure all of that out on their own. And I don't know that there are very few people that have had that, unless Bloomberg is going to come back and become the mayor of Detroit. I don't know that if very few people across the country have this kind of experience. So I do feel like there has to be a balance of strong leadership, hard work, like somebody really willing to put in the work at every level, and strong management. It has to be, experience in that strong management, significant management.
It is interesting because I hear from a lot of voters who say that they like Attorney Todd Perkins and Reverend Kinlock. And when I talk to them, why? I mean, part of it is that they are political outsiders that don't have any connection to a system that has disenfranchised and frustrated a lot of people. And so it's an interesting kind of theme I've been watching of this. Like, if you're upset with the status quo, there are candidates here that don't have really any association with the Duggan era. Whereas other candidates have been much more apt to promote their association with the current mayor and talk about how they're going to pick up the ball and move it forward, particularly Council President Sheffield and Councilmember Durhal, who have said that, we have been here setting the foundation and now we're going to carry that work forward. And polling has shown, largely people appreciate what Mayor Duggan has done, but they're a little bit more split on whether somebody should come in with a kind of bold new vision for the future or do a lot of the things that, continue a lot of the work that he's been doing. And so I wonder, Kamau, like when you have conversations with voters, when you're out knocking on doors, how do people feel about like the state of the city right now and kind of where we are at this moment in time? And like, what are their concerns about where we're moving forward? I mean, how do they feel about this whole conversation of like what we've got out of the Duggan era and how we're kind of moving into a new era?
Yeah, I would say that there's obviously a mix. I would say in general, a lot of folks feel that um, there's been a lot of cosmetic progress. So when we think about things that do matter, right? Parks and recreation, community centers, mobility, and those are things that like really the city is focused on. And those are great. I think there are a lot of just like material and personal things that folks are concerned about, like thinking about getting roofs fixed or folks who have had flood damage in their basements. For me, I organize our Black male leadership team, which is largely Gen Z to millennial Black men, a population that's largely been disregarded politically. And I think much of what comes up for them is like things such as mental health, addressing root causes of crime in new and different and bold ways. I think that some of the existing things around, CVI are great, and it's great that those exist. But there are also other things when we think about just economic opportunity for young people. I talk to a lot of mothers and grandmothers that talk about men in their family that don't have opportunity right now and don't have very clear paths to getting into the workforce or getting into some of the new industries that are coming to Detroit. And so I think to your question, and I think how it links back to, I think a really valuable point that was being made about like leadership and management is, I think the real testament of leadership, regardless of someone's status politically, is really like their ability to unlock other leaders, but also to unlock people in Detroit in really meaningful ways.
I can just add one thing. I mean, this is a really huge venture running the city, and it has pieces in housing and health and transportation and sewage management and all of these things, and there is no single person who knows who is an expert on all of those things. So I think part of what we're saying when we're talking about leadership is, can you put the people around you to, make 90% or 85% or whatever it is of the decision to do the right thing on those things, and you are then the person who's making the final call on it. But we're not going to find, again, unless we're talking about the current mayor or a current mayor, you're not going to find someone who has experience doing all of those things. So that's, just to underline again why I think the people who are around are so important. And when I look at candidates' experience, I also wanting to look at if they have run organizations or been in leadership positions in the government, who have they put around them? How did they put them around them? What kind of people were they, and how did they do?
Can I add something here? I
Yeah.
have to really stress, I really appreciate what he shared so far on this. And it made me think, when we were talking about experience in leadership, one of the things I think about is a good leader also has to follow. And do you have, again, as Maurice said, do you have the folks around you that are knowledgeable, that are engaged, that understand the residents, the concerns, that are going to help you make those decisions? Because it's not going to just be you, it's going to be this team that you put together. So, as a leader, are you going to be able to pull that team together to be able to help you run this city? And be able to defer when you don't know. And so when I think about leadership, people always think they're in charge, they're doing all of this, but will you be able to step back and think, okay, I have this team and they're helping me to run this city, and being that leader. But also, I'm going to just put it out there, in some of these spaces, some of these folks, where have you been? I have not seen you at anything, but you are campaigning right now and you certainly want the vote and you are showing up everywhere. But where were you in some of the things that have been happening prior to January? Because I know January is when you might have said, I'm running, but prior to January, you were already having these discussions about where I wanted to be. So I've seen some of these candidates in spaces in the last 6 months where I'm like, you could have just sat at the table as a resident and listened, but you were trying to sell me something, push some agenda. But why wouldn't you sit at the table as a resident in the city of Detroit and say, you know what? Let me hear what folks are talking about, housing issue, the transportation issue, what I'm struggling with. But instead, you stand there on your pulpit trying to convince me you're the person for me, but you can't hear what I'm talking about. So again, I think about that experience, that leadership, and all of that. But then you're a resident, well, I'm assuming you're a resident in the city of Detroit, where's that in this whole equation? So I'm just going to throw that in there for.
Yeah. So let's talk a little about housing, because I think that is one of the big, issues here in the city and in the campaign. And I want to start with Anika. Can you just frame for us what the city's challenges are with affordable housing, right? I think when we talk about that, often what we're thinking about is housing at the lowest end of the economic scale, which of course we do have serious issues with. But those problems extend across economic classes in the city as well. We have lots of things that we need to do. Can you just talk a little about what the housing picture is and what the next mayor will face in terms of trying to deal with it?
Right. I think there's good news and bad news in housing. I'll start with the good news because I feel like we can build from that. Black home ownership is the fastest growing home ownership in the region, right? So both in Detroit and in the region, Black households are able to purchase homes, and we're seeing a lot more of that than we've had in a really long time, outpacing even white households up to a certain income point. And I feel like that is something to build from. And it moves away from this narrative that you can't buy a home in the city, right? You can, and we're seeing it. Now, with that said, when I say build from that, um, those that home ownership rate are also small mortgages. So these are the home values are right around $100,000. And what we know is that the majority of the neighborhoods where we're seeing the most investment, the housing value is much higher than that. It's more around 200, 250. So there is an imbalance between how we're investing in neighborhoods and then where we're actually able to see home ownership approaches. The other thing that we are seeing that we're very concerned about is that we are still about a 50% rental city in Detroit, and rental rates are higher than they've ever been. And that is really, really because nothing else has changed. So it's not like we have more Section 8 vouchers. We are not seeing additional subsidy in rental rates. So what we're seeing is a lot more property owners that are having to charge higher rents to households that can't afford it. And so then that cost burden is increased. The cost burden for Detroiters is higher than we've seen in a long time. And that, to me, should be a very specific priority for any of the candidates. That not just, I'm going to bring back affordable housing, but specifically, we need to invest in the neighborhoods to be able to hold the value affordable where you're already seeing traction for accessible home ownership in neighborhoods, right? So the neighborhoods where you are seeing home ownership are neighborhoods that are still seeing a lot of blight and less investment. And so that needs to happen. But we also need to have very intentional and strategic approaches to rental housing if 50% of Detroiters are renting housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everyone else, what are you hearing in this campaign that either gives you hope about the housing issue or that concerns you? What are you hearing from the candidates?
I will say there's a lot of talk, but I'm not really hearing what the plan is. How are you going to deal with our housing crisis? We have rent, as Anika mentioned, it's skyrocketing. And a lot of folks in this city are renters. They are homeowners. There's so many issues that exist within the housing space. And I'm hearing, yes, we're going to do affordable housing. Yes, we're going to do this. I'm going to change this. But I'm not necessarily hearing how you're going to do that. And that kind of worries me across the board. Some candidates definitely have a little bit more of a plan, but some just it's just a talking point because we know that it is something that Detroiters are worried about. So what we're hearing is folks want to know, what's the plan? Give me some ideas. Where are you going to get? How are you going to fill the gap funding? What's the game plan there? We know we are going to lose certain funding. How are you going to fill that? Um, how are you going to get to building more affordable housing? It's a nice plan, but how are we going to get there? So a lot of that again is coming back to that concrete plan. I know you're throwing out a lot, but I want to hear a little bit more than, in my 100 days, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to take a little bit more than 100 days in a lot of these areas, but can we get, and again, I'm not saying have a 20-page paper, but can you give me at least the first two steps of what we get into? That would be nice. And I think folks want to see a little bit more of that. I think that's been part of the frustration where so many people are undecided where these candidates are, because there's some that are in a handful that are in the same box, and then some, you're like, okay. And the ones in that box, you're like, okay, can you stand out a little bit more? Can I get a little bit more of like, okay, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Come on, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with that, and I super agree, and I think they're failing to have an honest conversation about just the political conditions in Michigan. We have a split legislature right now, and so when we think of a lot of things that folks are in need of, whether it be like right to repair or rent control, those are things that can't be implemented at a city level. Those actually require escalation up to the state level. And so I'm actually super curious for a lot of candidates that are talking about affordable housing, or we've seen some bolder things be said around like zoning laws and tax reform. Those are things that like they're going to have to build a series of political relationships in Lansing to actually implement and to do. And so I think that's something that I've really been craving from candidates. It's just an honest conversation about what does that roadmap look like to get buy-in from people in the Capitol, but also to what people are they talking to right now to actually move that forward. It does seem like it's just something that they're saying because it's a popular thing, but there's not a lot of strategy that's being expressed to the public around it.
Yeah, I would add, Yelena, I totally agree. And I want the 20-page paper, right? Like I want you to have the 20, 50-page plan of how you're going to build the affordable housing units. And then like Kamau was saying, how are you going to convince Lansing to change the laws that you need in order to implement a rent freeze or whatever, whatever you're calling for. And that I have not really seen from any of the candidates. I think the other thing is, to be totally honest, like this is not a unique Detroit issue. We're dealing with it in a unique way because of the history of our city, but nearly every major city, I should say, not nearly, every major city is dealing with an affordability crisis for renters where rents are rising sky high. I mean, it is one of the main things that led to the Mamdani winning the nomination in New York City. I mean, it is the thing that folks are talking about. And part of what is causing that are national trends. And I just want folks to be really honest about that and not say that, oh, I'm going to, solve it all when I get into office as the Detroit mayor, because we just know, we know that you cannot do that. And, being distruthful to voters is not really helpful for anyone in the long run.
What about public safety? We've heard a lot from the candidates about that, and of course, we have a former police chief who's running to be mayor, and he has his own brand of ideas about public safety. I think one of the interesting things about that subject is it gets conflated with policing a lot, right? Some people think that there is no difference between the issue of public safety and talking about the police department, how it's funded, how it's run, how it's managed. And I know that there is a big difference. And I think people who live in the city and deal with safety issues in neighborhoods understand that this is about more than policing. I'm wondering if any of you have heard anything during the campaign that says to you, hey, here's somebody who's going to do this in a different way that I like, or here's somebody who's going to build on the things that we're already doing and make them work even better. Who's heard something that caught their attention on this issue?
Yeah, I'm trying to give a cynical response to this. Yeah, I'll say there's two really popular policies that have been pretty consistent across candidates. One is preserving CVI, which of course makes sense. The other is community policing, which is a very, very broad term of what that may mean. And I do think it still limits the conversation to policing. What we haven't heard is, I think candidates really dig into, we've heard mental health come up, certainly in several forums, several debate, but we actually haven't heard, what does that look like for city government to really work with DWIN and think about what initiatives are needed for folks facing mental health challenges. I think, there have been candidates who've talked about youth engagement and youth programs. And I'd be really curious about the path towards that with, a lot of federal funding being pulled from those things. So I think that there's certainly like some consistent things that they're saying across candidates. The challenge is in I think the consistent thing that we've been talking about on this call is just like the details, what community partners need to be a part of that vision, and really what does the roadmap look like to building some of those initiatives to facilitate public safety. But yeah, I guess that's my honest answer without.
I mean, what's interesting is that, for all these subjects, there seems to be pretty strong agreement that we haven't heard enough, which is interesting given that they've been at this for 6 months and we only have about a week and a half before
Right.
we're going to make a decision.
Can
Why
I?
are we doing all this stuff?
I think one of the things on the safety issue that I think is going to be really important for people to think about is safety. We have to think about safety just, as you said, more than just the policing, because safety is also a business and revitalization issue, right? A safe neighborhood. If you feel safe in your neighborhood, that's a neighborhood that you want to be in. If you don't feel safe, if those are the places where you're seeing people leave, or businesses choosing not to go into that neighborhood, whether it's real or perceived based on the data. And there are so many good models for this across the country that have been able to combine high concentration of violent crime or broken window crime with other kinds of social and mental health practices. We've seen it in Chicago, Baltimore, Oakland, really, really good models that we could bring here, and that we can activate as part and build off of what was already working. I do feel like this is something that we should keep pushing, right? Even though we only have a week to go, we do still need to really keep pushing on this.
So as I think about this question of public safety, I'm going to throw something here. I've been in Detroit now 10 years, so I'm from New York City. And it's until I moved here that this conversation, that I've got this understanding of how deeply folks look to police in the question of safety. Um, and I had to really like delve into it myself to understand that folks look to the police for a lot of that. In other communities, we don't look to policing to feel safe, to feel like a community. So it takes a minute to really get into that. And then to currently have a police chief running to be mayor, and really all his platform is public safety. We live in a climate of over policing of almost all Black and brown neighborhoods. And so I'm a little uncomfortable when the conversation comes around, oh, policing. I think we talking about safety, we've got to talk about what our neighborhoods look like. Do we have a school that is abandoned, has been sitting there? How do we deal with that issue? Is there a question of what is happening in that neighborhood? Are folks having access to the services they need? We don't deal with some of the underlying issues that really exist in communities, in neighborhoods that are really struggling to, figure out where my next meal is coming from. What are some of the challenges? So I think we look to this heavy-handedness of like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do order, and it's almost very repressive rather than what is the issues. There might be neighborhood groups that are in these areas. There's a block club. Have a conversation with them. They will tell you a lot about what the needs are, rather than you coming from the outside looking in saying, well, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z. So I think the conversation around people's safety needs to switch in terms of asking folks. I'll throw one other piece in there. We've got folks running around cities in mass abducting and kidnapping people. Where's that safe? I mean, I'm looking at this room of folks right now. 5 or 6 of us could get kidnapped walking on that street right now. They're not making any differentiation on that. So where are we with the question of public safety? I don't know. As a melanated person, I'm not sure I feel safe in a lot of spaces. So, I mean, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that whole monkey right there around that question of policing.
Well, it's interesting. It's really interesting to hear you say that you feel like there's more focus and reliance here on policing with regard to public safety than in New York, right? I mean, that's a city that we all know has a very troubled history, especially of the relationship between the police and Black and brown people. For you to say that you feel like we are even more focused on that here and more reliant on the idea of policing as a solution, that says a lot. It's a really interesting outside perspective on what we're doing.
I think to Yelena's point too, I mean, when you think about, we need to broaden the idea of public safety, think of infrastructure and how that contributes to safety in a neighborhood. People talk about, pedestrian and bicycle access in neighborhoods. I do think there's been a fair amount of emphasis, from the candidates about investing in neighborhoods, building up commercial corridors, trying to create better strategic planning so that residents have more autonomy over what happens in those neighborhoods. I think one story of the Duggan era is this kind of expansion of executive power, and I wonder where that moves forward as we talk about shifting focus from downtown back into neighborhoods. Do residents have a say in that future? Is the next mayor going to be kind of top down with that approach? I'd be kind of curious about how folks are feeling about the ability of them to participate in the shaping of these neighborhoods. I mean, I hear so much frustration from folks about the land bank, when it comes to land being held for developments that they may not agree with, or it gets in the way of projects that they would like to do. I mean, that's just one of like a ton of examples we could bring up there. But when it comes to public safety and neighborhood investments, do residents feel like they are going to be included in that process, or have the opportunity to with a new mayor?
I mean, I think that a lot of this is skewed because of the elephant in the room, the elephant in the race, which is the former police chief who has a particularly conservative bent, I've yet to see one of his lawn signs not on a gas station or a liquor store. I mean, it's definitely pulling the race in a particular direction when it comes to discussing public safety. I don't know what effect that is going to have on his success in the primary. I have my personal thoughts. But I think that the thing that I am concerned about when I think about public safety is some of the crackdown from the federal government, not only of ICE, like Yelena mentioned, coming into neighborhoods, but I mean, we've seen the current federal administration threaten and execute on putting National Guard and the Marines into cities. As a Black city in this moment, I feel like we're, have the potential to be a real target for that. And that is actually one of the things that, really strong leadership of the mayor is going to make a huge difference. How do you, push back against ICE doing mass raids? How do you stop the National Guard or other federal law enforcement sources from coming into the city and, enacting President Trump's agenda? And again, that one particular candidate is saying that they would openly like to collaborate with President Trump. And I think that just kind of skews the entire race, and we don't really get to talk about some of these details, like you're saying, Malachi, of like what is bringing some of this power back to the neighborhoods actually look like.
I think for one thing too, the elephant in the room, we are going to have a Black mayor for the first time in 12 years, 13 years.
Yeah.
And we're also on the national climate, we're dealing with white supremacy. So again, coming back to that bubble, we are going to need to have a mayor that's going to have to withstand a lot. We know the president cannot stand Detroit. We've seen it consistently what he says. Um, and we know that we need someone who's going to stand against a lot of stuff that's going to come from the federal government. Funding is one piece, but the armed part of the state, the armed part of the federal government, they show up here. Are you going to be a mayor that's going to protect everyone, regardless of status? And again, people having this immigration question, all of these other questions, but there's just blanket, it's brown and black folks. There's no differentiation on what your status is in this city. So are we going to have a mayor? And this is a question I ask, and some of the folks I talk to ask, are you going to be a mayor for everyone? Are you going to stand and say, these are my citizens, these are the residents in this city, and I stand in protection of them? Now, that is a heavy toll. I don't know. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't get that sense. I know who, absolutely not. But the folks who viably could be our next mayor, I don't get the sense that you truly are going to be 10 toes down on that for your residents. And that includes folks who might be returning citizens. That might be folks who are poor and are on the bottom of trying to make ends meet. So that's a real concern that I'm hearing in some of the different neighborhoods and talking to different folks. So where do we stand? So yeah, public safety, but it's a larger question and it kind of concerns me. And it concerns a lot of folks that are voting. And again, it comes back to why a lot of people are very indecisive of who they're going to vote for, even though the primary is in, less than 2 weeks. And I'm one of those people. I mean, I'm voting for the first time in a Detroit election. And I'll say this, I'm voting for the first time in a local election. And so for me, I'm torn between where am I going? I'm in spaces where I'm literally hearing the candidates all the time. And some of it has just become noise.
Yeah. All right. So in the minutes that we have left here, let's talk about what each of you want to see in the next, however many days we have before August 5th. That would help you make a decision. That would help you clarify the field. I think if there's any theme from this last period of time we've been talking, it's that there's not enough detail, that not enough specifics from the candidates about how they would do these things or what they would do. What could they do or what should they be doing in these last few days to make it clearer? What are you looking for that will help you and maybe help others make these decisions?
Yeah, I guess I'll tag in first. So for me, and I think others will probably feel similarly, it's like I do want to see some specificity around like what particular stakeholders need to be pulled in for some of these policies, or what does this mean for Lansing, or more broadly, how it connects to the federal government. The other big thing for me is just I would want to get a sense of how they actually want to promote democracy as a lawmaker. We've talked a little bit about just like immigration, for example. We held our mayoral forum this weekend in Southwest, and there's many residents that wouldn't go to that because of like feeling unsafe leaving the house. And so we have to think about like how would we engage Detroiters, whether it be looking at the Department of Neighborhoods or district managers or resource manager or many of these different kind of administrative roles that exist in a city. And so I think really thinking through how they want to promote democracy to engage as many people as possible, and not only the democratic process, but also too in community development and all these bigger items in public safety and so forth and so on. So I don't know if it'll happen in the next less than 2 weeks, but I do think that would be something that would definitely separate the candidate from the others if they were to clarify those things.
Yeah, I think in terms of the topics we're discussing, I think that all of the candidates right now are hitting on the things that are most popular for Detroiters in vastly different ways, but they're all hitting on, affordability and housing and public safety and development. I think what I want to hear is a little bit more about how exactly they will govern. And part of, I think, what would get them there the quickest is thinking about talking about what things they actually think are going to be difficult. Is a difficult job? What are the specific things that are going to be difficult about your agenda? How are you going to do them? Where are you going to ask for help? Who is going to do them? And how long is it going to take? So yeah, that's details, but I want, specific details about what are the things that are going to be hard. I don't just want your top line number that you put at the top of the commercial. I want how you're going to get there.
Yeah. I love that. Tell me what will be hard about the job. Tell me what you might not be able to pull off in a short period of time.
I know it's the job interview question, right? That no one likes to answer. Like, what is your main fault? But I think it's very important here. I mean, it is not an easy job. It's not. We all know that. So, what are the ways that you're already planning on it being difficult, and how are you gonna mitigate that?
I have to echo what both Maurice and Kamau said, but I still go back to that point of, as a resident, are you truly going to be for all residents? And that's where I come back to. I'm hearing a lot of policy stuff, and that's great. But at the end of the day, there are so many people involved that live in this city, I should say, that live in this city that feels outside of this entire process. Yes, I'd like to see more information on some of the things that you're going to work on, how you're going to achieve that. Like Maurice said, what are your challenges? But how are you going to make the residents in this city feel safe, and not safe in policing, but safe that you are going to be a mayor for every single person that resides in your city? That would be where I think if anyone could come out in that way, I probably will be checking that off real quick and be like, okay, I vote there.
I think what I'm hoping to see, I think one, an acknowledgement of how different Detroit is now, because it is dramatically different. And the reason why I feel like that's important is because the next mayor will lead what the city will be under these circumstances. And so then it does have to really move away from sort of the broad strokes, high level policy into I'm the right leader, right manager. I understand, I understand all of the issues at hand, including the budget, building partnerships, being able to manage Lansing, being able to manage the federal government, and securing our place as a nationally competitive city. All of those things is really what's required as the mayor, and really demonstrating that leadership and management for the next decade of Detroit, and what that would really bring. So that's really what I'm hoping to see, not only in the next 2 weeks, but then after the primary, we'll still have a few months after that. Hopefully after the primary, it feels like what I've been so impressed with about Detroiters, and I know we're over time, is how many forums they are. And I know all of the forums feel, there's so many forums, the candidates feel inundated and like they might be watered down. But I feel like it's also a testament to Detroiters standing up and wanting to hear from the candidates specifically. Yeah. They want them to answer their specific questions. That's a very different Detroit than it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So
I think
Yeah.
that's huge. I think that's huge. The idea that so many different groups have pulled together and held, some sort of forum or opportunity for candidates to show up and talk to the people in that community or who are a part of that interest group. I have never seen that kind of activity at that level in this city before. It literally is every other day at this point that there's another opportunity to hear from them or see them, talk about this work. And it gets frustrating sometimes. People say, well, people in Detroit are really disaffected, and they don't vote and they don't participate. I think the number of people who've just participated in the campaign this year is mind blowing, and we'll see what happens on election day with turnout. But already I feel like there is this energy around the idea of this choice that feels, as you point out, and it just feels really different than what we're used to.
Well, I think we're going to have to close things off there. I really appreciate the conversation, guys. Thank you for joining us. And I think we're going to do this again, probably even a couple of times. As we get out of this primary, we've got a whole general election ahead of us where we get to dive into the two candidates that make it out. And I think that's going to put a lot more focus on specifics and policy, like we've been searching for. But if you are one of those voters that is sitting there with your AV on the kitchen table wondering, what the hell do I do with this thing? Go to BridgeDetroit.com and read our coverage. We have an election tracker, which is basically a place to get news briefs from the campaign trail. We also have candidate profiles that are going up. Obviously, check our backlog of videos on Bridge Detroit. Our this show, Detroit Next, obviously is available on our YouTube channel and podcast networks. Thank you, as always, to Detroit is Different for putting this on. We're here in the studio today. Kari Frazier is the man for hooking us up. And I just appreciate getting the chance to continue to do this. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us. Anything you'd like to leave folks with as we close out here?
No, just pay attention this last couple of days before the election. Go vote. You can start on the 26th with early voting. And of course, 90,000 people have absentee ballots, so you can return those. And then on August 5th, meet me at the polls. I still am somebody who's old school. I go and cast my ballot on election day, but we're getting down to it. And this is a huge choice. We want as many people as possible to get the information they need and then exercise their role in this important event.
Thanks so much to our panelists for being here, guys. Appreciate it. And check back with us. That's all for now. Detroit Next. Peace out.